Christmas collection. Amy, I was listening to the album on my way to work today. It was a crowded New York City subway, not always the most pleasant experience, but I found that the music kind of relaxed me and improved my mood. When you revisit some of these classic Christmas songs, both on this album and on the Christmas tours you do every year, do they still have special meaning for you?
Oh, of course they do. You know, the great thing about Christmas music is that the window of time where you really listen to it is so short that you really can't get sick of it. And there's something about Christmas songs that I think it just brings out the best of our memories, sort of the best of our nostalgic feelings toward the holidays. And you're right. If I'm listening to music, I'm not on subways often, but I am occasionally. Don't you find yourself not afraid to look in people's eye and kind of smile?
Yes, yes. In New York, that can be seen as a little weird, but yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always happy to hear a new Christmas song that I think can fit in with the old classics, and I think one song on this album that can do that is I Need a Silent Night. So tell me, what was the appeal of that song and its message to you?
Well, I wrote that song with Chris Eaton.
Mm-hmm.
The verse and the chorus they juxtapose
mm-hmm.
themselves. The craziness of shopping and commercialism and all that, and then what we really long for, which is peace.
How do you find that peace during the holiday season with all you've got going on, the tours, the shopping, the usual stuff? How does Amy Grant find a silent night, a prayerful night?
For the last several years, at least one night after everybody's asleep, I will go build a fire, turn off all the lights except for the Christmas tree light, and pull out my guitar and sing. Mm. I guess all by myself with music and quiet, I'm welcoming the Christ child.
Right.
Just so the season doesn't come and go, and it was all wrapping paper and craziness, and I never really said, sure glad you came.
Well, along those lines, there's another song on the album that it's a classic song, but you recorded it for the first time, Count Your Blessings, and I read that you appreciate the message of that song. Have you gone through any periods when you were too focused on the negatives in life as opposed to the blessings?
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, all of us go through wonderful times and difficult times, and I love my children. We're a blended family of 5. I birthed 4 of them. There have been nights that I just have been overwhelmed, either because one of them is struggling or going through a hard time, or, none of them are talking to me. That's just the daily stuff.
Right.
That doesn't begin to talk about times when somebody you love is sick, or a lot of us have been through divorce and that total upheaval, and you feel like you live months of your life in a snot cry, And, all those things are their own tornado. But just daily life, I feel like if you look at somebody who seems peaceful and relatively happy, then they have learned to live with gratitude, even for the craziness. I'm grateful for the mayhem of 5 children. And, I'm 48, and I feel like I have learned that lesson. My parents are older, and I've got one of my best friends has a hideous kind of cancer. But I look at her, and she's really changed me. Her name's Ruth.
Okay.
But I looked at her the other day, and she smiled, and she said, I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to figure out what this next chapter looks like.
Right.
And you just go, I love that.
If somebody in that situation can find the positive, then the rest of us have nothing to complain about.
Absolutely. And you know what she says? She says, Amy, I would not have traded cancer for anything. And she's living with it right now, but she just said, it just brought into focus everything that really mattered for me. She said I would never go back to that uncertainty that I knew before. So I got great people around me, and that really, that helps.
Amy, you mentioned before that you have a blended family. Now, Christmas, of course, is a time for families to come together, and I think a lot of people go through that experience of a blended family. Is there anything you learned from going through that experience of trying to blend families, especially around the holidays, that other people can maybe take some advice from, things you did right, things you could have done better?
First and foremost, I would say that respect is the most important thing.
Okay.
And so respect for somebody's silence, respect for their ideas, respect for their space. And so, what we try to do, even if you don't have a blended family, if your family's big enough, you have, your nieces and nephews marry and all this kind of stuff. So it's always, instead of saying, hey, here's my idea, hell with the rest of you, this is what we're doing, it's important to say, why don't we try to do this? How does that work with everybody? You just talk and be respectful and say what works for you. And sometimes you say, I'll work around your schedule. Hey, this time could you work around mine? But how you come at somebody, sort of the landscape of what's already happening in your head has a lot to do with what's going to happen. And if you come to somebody with understanding and flexibility and respect, almost any good thing can happen.
Okay. Amy, I want to jump to another project that you had done. You wrote a book a few years ago, Mosaic Pieces of My Life So Far, and in the book you mentioned that your grandparents taught you that with great blessing comes great responsibility. How did they teach you that?
At one point in my life, when I was in my early college years, there were 5 generations alive in my family. Great-grandparents, grandparents, my mom and dad, my generation, and then 2 of my sisters were already having kids. And the gathering place was my great-grandmother's farm. And this farmhouse, it's just the neatest thing. Of course, Nashville had just grown up around it. There were neighborhoods all around that farm, and it was just so wonderfully out of place. But I refer to them because I knew from the time I was a little girl that they had willed that farm to a college, a university in Nashville. And so, even though we would ride our old naggy horses around the farm and go play in the barn, and, you could just get lost. It was hundreds of acres. And I would sometimes have friends come over and say things like, man, you're so rich, or all the tacky things that kids say. And I would always say, well, we just get to enjoy this for a little while, because when my great-grandmother passes away, it will all go to a university. They really believe in education. And, I was probably not even born when she had signed her will, but I just grew up knowing that was the plan. And so it's funny because now I think that just gave me a feeling in life that we are stewards and not owners. And it, I'm sure it's affected. I don't know how it's affected how I've lived. I mean, more than I know how to say, and I think money is an important thing to give, but so much more than that is our time, our ideas, our encouragement.
Right.
I've got a really good friend who moved to the States from Trinidad, and she has a son with cerebral palsy, and he's racked up so many hospital bills. Every time he has a seizure, he's in public school. Of course, they rush him to the hospital, and it's just ching, 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 ching,
right.
ching.
Sure.
Anyway, her husband's a great musician, but they have not been able to make it in music, and so they clean houses as a family. And she and I love to walk the parks, and I don't know how we met. Life is weird, but she called me the other day, and she said, Amy, I'm not asking you for a handout, but could you please get your women friends together and help me brainstorm? If I'm not afraid, I believe we can pay these bills off. If I'm not afraid. And so I'm on the road all of October, November, December. And I hung up the phone from my friend Deb, and I called my assistant, and I said, would you check the Farmer's Almanac and see what the weather's going to be November 7th and 8th? Because usually in Tennessee there's one little warm patch in November. It's called Indian Summer. In 2 weeks, we pulled together a yard sale. And actually, I called the university that my great-grandparents willed their farm to. And I said, is it okay if we have this yard sale on your campus? And they said yes. Anyway, we had 1 day of drop-offs. I had no idea if anybody was going to drop anything off, but we set up 100 tables. We had those little tents. We made $25,000 in 1 day.
Wow.
And it was just, and I just said, bring your trash, bring your treasures. I got on the radio. I got on TV. you know, and I'm telling you, the atmosphere at that yard sale, there were people from both sides of the tracks. Every nationality from Nashville was there. And when there was just an hour and a half left in the sale, I got over the microphone and said, everything is $1. And you would have thought it was Christmas. All the furniture went, you know, all the people that had worked the yard sale, a lot of them from really modest poverty line incomes.
Right.
And then after about 45 minutes of that frenzy, another friend from the school got on over the loudspeakers and said, everything left is free.
Huh.
It was like Christmas all over again. It was awesome. You know, I look at that and I go, how boring if somebody had written a check for $25,000, and how exciting when a few hundred people in a community came together, and, you know, all my friends from Trinidad, you know, just they would speak, and it was, you know, come to the $1 table, you'll not get a better deal. You know, just there was so much love on that yard. It was awesome. So
it's great that you you know, that you started that, and it just shows your generous heart. I know you've done a lot for charities, and I think it's just a daily part of your life. So I want to thank you for joining me today. I encourage everybody to pick up the Christmas collection from Amy Grant. And Amy, Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you so much, Tony.